All right. Good evening, DSU student body and faculty. This evening, we will be presenting the debate for the position of Vice President of Academic and External. I am your moderator for the evening, Mark Joycey. Before we get started, here are a few announcements. First and most important, we recognize that we are holding this debate on unceded Mi'kmaq land. Second, we would like to thank the Greywood and the people who helped set up the mics and the tech crew for allowing us to host this debate, so thank you very much. Tonight, this debate is about the discussion of ideas and actions that will help make the DSU, and more importantly, the students, have a positive time here at Dalhousie University. Each candidate here is running to help improve the well-being of all students here at Dal. There will be agreement and disagreement here on stage on how to reach these objectives. Candidates have every right to disagree and argue about ideas and actions, and we encourage healthy debate. We do not encourage attacks on each other or other groups of people in a way that is discriminatory or offensive. Those who attempt to engage in this behavior, including those in the audience, as deemed by the moderator or members of the Elections Committee, will not be tolerated. Now, on to the debate itself. All candidates have read the rules for the debate and agreed upon them before participating. Candidates will get 2 minutes max for opening statements. Questions will be asked by myself based on questions I have written or have been presented to me by the student body. A question will be asked to one of the candidates. The candidate will get 90 seconds to respond. Every other candidate will get 90 seconds to rebuttal or respond. Then there'll be a max 10-minute discussion between the candidates on the issue of the questions, as well as follow-up questions by myself. Candidates will be respectful to others speaking during this time. The order of candidates given opening statements has been determined at random. Andrew Hall, you are first.
All right, can everybody hear me? No? Is this better? All right, cool. So my name's Andrew Hall, and I'm running for VPAE because I want to ensure that our students not only have a good and safe time here on campus, but that their success in the community afterwards is ensured as well. I've been doing this university thing for a long time, and I've studied a lot of different disciplines, and I've seen a lot of the problems that come from each, and trying to ensure success, I think, is what we need to be doing. And I think I'm the best person for that job.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have Evan Jordine. Sorry, did I say your name wrong? Okay, I apologize. How do you say your last name?
My name's Evan Chador.
Okay, sorry about that.
No. So I guess a better thing to sort of introduce into this conversation is what is the actual function of academia in society. So there's essentially 3 things that it exists for, right? So there's, first of all, a university is going to exist for the fact that it is going to have congregations of people that need to base their knowledge on the facts and negate bad ideas based upon their accuracy to the truth. And secondly, you need to have the university be lenient towards those opinions, because if not, then you're going to end up with a completely totalitarian ideal. So, and on top of that, you need people to, who are willing to express themselves in a way that makes other people uncomfortable. You need to be able to do that. That is the central idea behind it.
Oh, are you all done?
Good.
Okay. All right, next up we have Masuma Khan.
Hi everyone, my name is Masuma Khan, and I am currently rerunning to be reelected for the Vice President Academic and External. So as you can tell by the name, Academic and External, the position has 2 portfolios. So not only academics, but also external work, and that means working with external organizations and representing the DSU to external organizations and much more. My platform consists of advocacy, experience, accountability, engagement, accessibility, equity, action, and efficiency. I want to ensure that there are free and accessible menstrual products throughout every washroom in the DSU, that there is a DSU-wide accessibility map that you can access through the DSU app, as well as Braille copies in person. I want to ensure that there's town halls happening, not only in Studley, but also Sexton, Carleton, as well as Truro, and mobile office hours that I'll be rotating every 2 weeks. So I'll spend 2 portions of my office hours in Truro, in Sexton,
1 minute.
and then the next week in Studley and Carleton. I want to ensure that we actually have issues policies for the union, because right now what it looks like in terms of infrastructure is the union cannot actually take a stance without having issues policies, and that means issues policies on tuition fees, on differential fees for international students, for marginalized students, for racialized students, for queer students, for trans students, for all students. So I want to make sure that the advocacy of the union is actually created by students, by getting involved in world cafes, as well as surveys that students can get involved in. So if you'd like more information on my platform, please visit my website, www.electmasumakhan.com. You can get in touch with me and all my social media there. Thank you so much for your time. Vote Khan.
Thank you. And last, but certainly not least, we have Ahmed Abdul Hussein.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ahmed Abdul Hussein. I'm in my 3rd year. Running for this position, it is very complex because, as Khan said, there are two portfolios that you have to focus on. You have the external relations and you have the academic. It's very important to look at the fundamental problem that we are facing right now. Last year, you have 10% to 12% that voted in the elections. So if you're going to look at the issues at hand, you also have to understand the lack of awareness that is on campus regarding DSU elections and their role in our environment. What I want to do is lead with integrity and make sure that all communities are heard. The feedback and the input of our students we represent as Dalhousie students is very crucial in moving forward and addressing all the issues that comes afterwards. It is very important for me to make sure that all the voices are heard, and that by making sure that they're accessible for all the students on campus, and to tackle social issues one by one. We as Dalhousie students represent Dalhousie and what it believes in. We as students also have a unified idea and have a common goal that we are in this university for, and we will work together in order to unify our voices and become stronger and give voice for the voiceless. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So just so everything starts to run smoothly, I'm just going to ask some of the questions I wrote, which are very easy to answer, just so everybody gets a feel for how this all works. So I guess we'll start with Ahmed Abdul Hussein, since you were the last to speak. You were the first to answer this question. Why are you the most qualified for this position?
I believe I'm the most qualified for this position because of my ethnic background. I was born in Austria, Vienna, raised in Dubai, raised in Dubai, and I'm a proud Canadian citizen, and I'm originally from Iraq. My cultural background really emphasized the importance of looking at different perspectives and making sure we nurture all these ideas for constructive and not destructive reasons. I also held a lot of executive positions in leadership organizations. Running committees and technical matter can be done and understood and executed as effectively and efficiently as possible. And I really lead with high levels of integrity and moral rectitude.
Thank you. Masuma, you can answer this question now.
Cool, yeah. I think that why I'm the most qualified is because I am the only one that's sitting at this panel that has actually been working in the job for the past year. And I wouldn't need a transition. I have a lot of experience. I've been working in the union for a few years, the question isn't about why I'm most qualified. I am qualified for this job, and I think an important part of why I'm the most qualified is because I believe in equity, which is, I think, is a word that hasn't really been used in this discussion so far. I believe in action, and I'm able to connect with students who are from marginalized backgrounds and who are from different communities and really connect with them on their issues. So I believe in action, I believe in equity, and I'm not here for lip service. I'm here to get things done like I have in the past, and that's what I'm here to do, and that's why I'm most qualified.
Thank you. Evan?
Unlike Musuma, I don't have any actual job experience within the DSU. I essentially got known around campus for the videos I made criticizing their work, specifically with the wrongful motion against Mary McDonald, which I would say was entirely an authoritarian action for them to do. And to be honest with you, I just want to represent students. I don't like this idea that people are just like, oh, I'm going to represent communities. It's like, how about we just represent the student body as students? Because that's what academia is about.
Thank you. And Andrew, you're next.
Okay, I think I'm most qualified for this job because of my vastly different experiences and programs I've studied. I've lived all across the US and parts of Canada. I've worked in private and public sector for corporations and local governments, and I'm good at combining what the students want and what the government needs, and ensuring that not only we have success in these 4 or 5 or like me 8 years in university, but also afterwards in our community, getting jobs and having a connect between academia and then actual community involvement. I've been really good at that in professional societies and engineering and in social societies for community volunteering. And I think that I'd be the best for this because that's just what I do. I like to listen to people, hear what their actual concerns are, recognize what your concerns are while in university and afterwards, and try to breach the gap between what they want and what they need.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, so again, just some easy questions, and we might as well just do it in reverse order now. So Andrew, what is the greatest issue that your position, so Vice President, Academic and External, is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
Well, I think that'd be community involvement and student advocacy within the university itself. Making sure students can find successful paths while they're in university to maximize their potential, and as well in the community, getting careers and having successful jobs. We're here to better ourselves, to better our community. We're not just here to have fun. And we need to learn how we can implement what we are learning here in the community. And so by going to the community and going to our school, I think that's our biggest concern is just community outreach, maximizing what we can do for ourselves and for others.
Thank you. Evan.
What was the question again?
What is the greatest issue that your position is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
What is the greatest issue that my position is in charge of?
The position you're running for.
Okay. Well, I think it's kind of self-evident in the fact that it's called the Vice President of Academic and External Affairs. But mainly, my biggest problem with it is that it's being run by radicals who do not represent the student body and have never tried to represent the student body. And I really do believe that they're in it for themselves.
Okay. Musuma.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question?
Of course. What is the greatest issue that your position is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
So an important part to recognize about the Vice President Academic and External is that it's not just one great issue. All student issues are what you deal with. So that's all academic issues. When engineering students are not getting, things on their transcript that are supposed to show up on their diploma, you go to Senate and you tell them that that needs to get done. When you have students who are coming to you disclosing issues of sexualized violence, you support them. When you have international students who have needed mental health support, but they don't have an MSI SSI and the DSU
1 minute.
insurance is not enough to cover that, that means that you work with that student to try see if there's funding because they've incurred $270,000 in costs and they're an international student. Do you know what I mean? How do you address it is you're there for the student. You show up, you do what you need to do, and you keep doing the work even when people are coming after you.
Okay, and Ahmed.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes. What is the greatest issue that Vice President, Academic and External is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
One of the greatest issues, I believe, on Dalhousie campus is that we forget that we are a unit and that we represent the same badge. We all go to classes. We all part of communities within Dalhousie community, and that was the not knowing that we are behind this badge is what causes the divide within our communities, and making sure that we are empathetic and understanding of one another is one of the resolutions that will help solve the problems regarding all the social issues that are at hand. Social issues change from time to time, and adapting to these changes are very crucial in knowing how to deal with them. Also, consultation and adherence of rules and policies are very important in moving forward in a progressive manner.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to do reverse again. So, Ahmed, what is the biggest challenge that you will face holding this position?
In one word, communication. It's hard to reach out to every community and understand their perspective on issues. Matters such as consulting before making a decision is a very great challenge, since we have conflicting ideas, and conflicting ideas are very important when trying to reach a resolution, because it constructively helps us build upon an idea and a concept. That's how concepts evolve over time. So communicating effectively to communities and listening to them, getting feedback and getting their input is going to be one of the greatest challenges. If pulled off, will be one of the greatest resolutions that unifies us as a Dalhousie unit.
Thank you. All right, Masuma, what is the biggest challenge that you will face holding this position?
So the position of VPAE faces many challenges because it deals with a lot of different student issues. But I think a big challenge is the fact that we don't have issues policies regarding tuition fees, international students, survivor support, and more. There's no infrastructure for the advocacy. The advocacy part of this role and portfolio hasn't really been developed. So I would say that the biggest issue is that there's not enough support. There's not enough support for DSAS. There's not enough support in terms of really outreaching to students and creating that infrastructure. So what I would do is do those town halls, ensure that students are participating in surveys, make sure that there's a World Cafe happening once every month, engage with students and societies, community groups, give space, hold space, and be there and show up.
Thank you. Evan, what is the biggest challenge that you will face holding this position?
If we're going to talk about it on a personal level, I think the biggest challenge is going to be actually trying to cooperate with people who clearly do not like conflicting ideas within their union. So I think that's going to be the biggest one. Other than that, I think that I would like to, for sure, set up a society within Dalhousie that lets people voice controversial opinions and let them speak their own minds and have Dalhousie fund that, because we don't have anything like that. Because personally, I'm a conservative libertarian when it comes to politics, and I'm open about that. And there is no advocacy whatsoever for any politics other than a fringe minority of radical leftists.
Thank you. Andrew, what is the biggest challenge that you will face holding this position?
I think it's going to be engagement and involvement. Communication seems like it is pretty good. We have various social media and emails. It's just people don't care, and that's evident by tonight. We have close to 20,000 students, and we haven't even filled a bar yet. And there's beer here. Come on, people. So I think that I'm gonna go to people. I'm not gonna have and hold events where they can come to me. I think that the issue of listening to people of different faculties and programs and their different ideals, I'm gonna go and talk to them. I'm gonna go into their
1 minute.
classrooms every week. I'm gonna go into almost every meeting I can, listen to people's problems, and try to figure out a way that we can not only go to our community and our government and lobby them, but also lobby our schools so we can actually be heard. All of us together, engineers, environmental scientists, business people, we all have different wants and needs, and we need to start voicing those. But I understand you're busy, so I'll come to you.
All right, thank you. So now these are going to be questions that have been asked by students. The same rules apply where they'll be given 90 seconds to respond, but then these are the questions where there'll be a 10-minute open discussion between the candidates with follow-up questions by myself if need be. So Andrew, since we're going back, how will you advocate for trans, racialized, and indigenous students?
Well, specifically, I think that any time society oppresses, puts down, or hinders anyone's growth or involvement in that community, we don't only harm them, we harm ourselves. And if we can lift everybody up, then we can all do better together. And so anytime they have personal issues in the community, I'm going to go straight to the community government and start talking to them about it. I'm going to go straight to Florizone's office in the Senate, and I'm just going to bring it right up and to their attention. And we're going to try to see if we can reach some common ground, because we all can't get what we want, and we need to understand that. But we can all, be treated
1
fairly.
minute.
It's not that hard. Just be respectful and getting the word out about these issues and understanding and education. That's the best way to breach gaps. People don't understand something, they automatically think that they don't like it or they hate it. And if we can just understand each other a little bit better, I think that we'll all do better together.
Thank you. Evan, how will you advocate for trans, racialized, and indigenous students?
I'd like to start off by saying that it's quite telling that the first question that's actually asked here is actually directly pertaining to identity, right? So it has nothing to do with the student body itself as a whole, right? So that's just a little telling, just to let you know. The thing is that when you say something like that, is that it's like, okay, how do we help all people as students? That is the issue. How do we represent people as students? How do we do that? Seriously, because when you start bringing up people that actually are minorities and whatnot, whether it's through their gender or it's through their race, what you're doing is you're going to end up marginalizing these people even further. That's all you're going to end up doing. If you unite them as students of this fantastic university, they'll be treated a lot differently, and they'll be treated better than they are now.
Masuma.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How will you advocate for trans, racialized, and indigenous students?
I would advocate for trans, racialized, and indigenous students by creating issues policies that are created by those community groups, so that the advocacy in regards to trans, indigenous, and racialized students are actually created by the community groups themselves. I don't believe when you're talking about the student body as a whole and you're saying that, why are you bringing up identities? These folks have these identities, and these are their true lived experiences. And I'm gonna go at it, but at a intersectional, anti-oppressive lens. I'm not going to take it as, this all lives matter sort of rhetoric. I'm going to identify the fact that, we're talking about equity. These students come from different places. Of course, in an ideal world, we would have all started at the same line, but that's not reality. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different experiences. We all come from different marginalizations, whether you were the first person in your family to come to university, a racialized student, indigenous student, a trans student who's dealing with transphobia every day on your campus. I'm here for you, and I'm here to create those issues policies if reelected.
Thank you. Ahmed.
Every member within this community is a contributing member, and they can elicit positive change if they're given the voice. You asked this question, why do you marginalize minority groups? But when you ask the question, why are they discriminated? Doesn't that marginalize them? Doesn't that make them feel inferior to the rest of the community? Yeah, I will support communities that feel marginalized because of discrimination and because of racism by holding conferences to share their stories. You know, every single person have their own story. So why can't you hear and listen to what they have to say? Things that you might gain a perspective on that if talking to a normal human being, you will not gain that extra perspective. Sometimes we're blindsided by how we are because we're so used to the normality of how things are that we exclude different opinions and put them on the side. So supporting them by having conferences or having cafes that give them that voice to explain and tell us about who they are and what they represent.
Thank you. Candidates, have 10 minutes to discuss this issue with themselves. I will be here moderating to make sure you guys do this in a respectful manner. You may begin.
You mind if I go first? I have to agree with Masuma on part of that. A lot of us are dealt a shitty hand. You know, we can't control how we're born or what we're born with, and we have to somehow fit into this little box we're told to fit into, and then we're told that we need to succeed now. I think that we need to recognize individual problems and help each person maximize their potential, whatever that may be, while in university, and then not only while they're in university, but including into the community. We're doing something here that's good. Dalhousie is good. This research institute, it's good. Academics is good. We're all learning, but we need to be able to bridge that gap into the community so the community doesn't look at us like, we're something completely different because they don't understand or we don't understand them. And so just trying to reach and bridge that gap in government and student affairs will bring everybody up to a higher level than we currently are.
It's an open forum. You guys are willing to back and forth with each other.
Sure. I don't think that only giving space to folks to really talk about their experience. I don't want to tokenize anyone for their experience. I want to ensure that it's a safe space. I want to ensure that these community groups aren't the ones that are taking on the work. The work is supposed to be done by the VPAE, and that's ensuring that you're going to those groups. That's ensuring that you're showing up when these groups are asking you to show up to things like supporting a rally for the murder of Tina Fontaine. That means showing up to walk the talk. That means showing up and protesting tuition fees. That means showing up and lobbying the provincial government, which I have done in my position, against differential fees and issues of survivor support that the provincial government is not addressing. That means really being there and ensuring that there's a safe space and that we're not tokenizing folks. I want to be doing the work. I want to ensure that students feel safe talking to me. I want to ensure that students know that I recognize what it's like to be a marginalized student. I recognize what it's like to be in an oppressive state. I recognize what it's like to deal with a lot of folks coming at you, laughing at you, discriminating against you, and harassing you for who you are. And I think that that's something that I can relate to students with. Not to only mention that I am also able to speak multiple languages, am coming at it from an intersectional and anti-oppressive scope, have had so much experience specifically in equity. And that's something that I'm extremely passionate about, is ensuring that we're going at this equitably, not equally, but equitably, because we're all starting off at different places. And to just assume that we're all at the same line is the most ridiculous thing, because you're automatically just discriminating against folks, and you're automatically just tokenizing folks, erasing their identities, and I'm not here for that. I'm not here for lip service. I'm here for action. I'm here for efficiency, advocacy. I'm here for all those things. So if you agree with what I've just said, vote.
This seems to be an issue that is full of jargon. And I honestly, I think that's true. I mean, you can laugh at that if you want, but the idea behind it is that you are automatically oppressed by your identity based upon the fact that it is systemic, right? But then when you ask people to point to the systemic racism or what have you, they are unable to do it with statistics or facts.
That's not true.
Point to me to a statistic that okay, point to me to any right that a non-minority student has that a minority student doesn't?
Audience.
I'd just like to swing this a 180 real quick, if you guys don't mind.
Do I have to?
Audience,
I have one.
This isn't an audience participation right now. This is a discussion between them.
Yeah. Did you assume that I wasn't?
Sir, they're having an open discussion. We're not.
I think we can do more though. Instead of just showing up and having rallies and protesting, I really want to be involved, going to local government and going to our Senate and writing the policy, not just recommending and protesting and asking for things, but telling them what we want to see and how we can do it, finding that common ground by showing them what we're capable of. We can't just ask for things and not give them anything in return. We have to show them what we can do for them, and then we can get something in return. So I just want to go a little bit farther. Like I understand what Masuma's been doing,
5 minutes.
but I just want to go a little bit further and give us something more for after university where we can actually get jobs and have economic growth. Because there's too many people graduating with these amazing degrees with so much knowledge, and then they're working as waiters and waitresses downtown. Like, why is a marine biologist serving me a beer? Let's get them internships and more opportunities, and so we can all do a little bit better afterwards.
I believe sometimes we get too consumed of arguing about what a person thinks rather than looking at the social issue objectively, and how it is impacting people. The past 2 years, last year, a flag was stolen during Black Month, and then this year you have a racial slur on campus. So you see that there is a fundamental problem about discrimination on campus, and that causes a lot of divide within the student body, because you state that there are minorities that are given extra or special attention, but you're framing it in a way that you look at the social issue and how it's affecting people, and not the social issue and how minorities are treated more special because they don't have enough rights.
Who said that?
So in the past 2 years, you always need to look at what's happening on campus and actively trying to find a solution for it.
Nobody said that.
Or it will further damage our reputation as Dalhousie students.
I think I want to talk about stats. So we know that 1 in every 4 women on a university campus will experience sexualized violence in their time here.
Not true.
And it's even higher for trans women. It's even higher for folks who have disabilities. It's even higher for racialized women. It's even higher for Indigenous women. So when you're talking about stats, when you're talking about Indigenous folks make up around 3% of this population on this stolen land. And then they are the highest amount of incarcerated people and represented within the foster care system, as well as in the prisons. So as well as Black folks being represented in the prisons and are more likely to get carded, chained, and put in the prison system. So when you're talking about the fact that there's no stats, there are many, many, many stats around these things. So I don't think that this is a place to give out false information.
Well, actually, the statistic that you're actually referencing to has been debunked. You're basically comparing the sexual violence rates of universities as comparable to the same as the Congo. That's not true. They've actually done studies about how many have actually happened, and it's about 18 in 1,000. And I would agree, that's still way too much. People shouldn't do that, right? Like, everyone agrees here. Sexual violence is bad. There you go, right? But you cannot place false statistics and try and scare people into thinking that your politics are right.
I think an important thing to recognize is that only 2.9% of acts of sexualized violence actually get reported. So the fact that you're
How do you know? How do you know if they're not reported?
Candidates, be sure to be respectful to each other on stage.
It's a valid question. She's saying that only 2.9% of them are being unreported. It's like, okay, how do you know about the other 97%?
When you're looking at a stat that says 1 in every 4 women experience sexualized violence, and we're saying that only 2.9%.
Do you know where that study came from?
Do you know where that study came from?
I do. It actually came from a personal survey through a sociological department.
1 minute.
Yes, and connecting with communities is what you want to do. Connecting with people who are part of society is what you want to do, who are going to inform you about societal issues that are happening. You want to connect with students who are telling you about issues that are happening on this campus. You don't want to just create a report and go to a different community. You want to ask the people what's been happening. You don't just want to create statistics out of nowhere.
I'm just
So if
saying
you're
don't
going to
create
talk-
false statistics
Candidates,
yourself.
please don't
Cut me
talk
off.
over each other.
If you're going to talk about statistics and then negate what I've just said, I think you have to have a better argument about such statistics. And I think that what I'm saying is incredibly true, and debunking a stat based off of the fact that it was created by sociologists who are literally the academics. When you're talking about academics who literally study society, you're talking about anthropology, you're talking
10
about
seconds.
these studies. Sociologists are the ones that would know. It's not a scientist, it's a sociologist who study social sciences, Evan.
Okay.
The statistic's still wrong. I'm sorry.
That is their a question. That was their forum. Now, I would like to take this time to go over some things. First of all, audience members, you're here to be an audience. There is a Q&A that is scheduled for next week. We would please appreciate if comments or interruptions are held, and please be respectful. Candidates, you need to make sure that everyone is getting the appropriate amount of speaking time. So interrupting each other or acting in a way that prevents others from getting their points across won't be should not be accepted as it is right now. So we will work on that for the next one. If anybody has any questions that they would like to submit, they can go see Kat right over there. She's taking questions from the audience that are here. We're going to have a 5-minute recess, and then we will be right back. I would like to take this time to clarify a few things, and I want to make sure that everyone is listening and being attentive. First of all, I would like to reiterate that the audience here tonight is the audience. Please refrain from making loud interruptions or comments. If you have any questions, please go see Kat. If you have any concerns, please email the CRO. Second, candidates on stage, I am still open to having an open forum, but this means that when candidates are speaking, the others are listening and being attentive. Harassing each other and being disrespectful, not just in words, but in terms of body language. It's not conducive to a healthy debate. So if we can try to make sure that everybody is just being attentive, making sure that everyone has a chance to speak that wants to speak, not cutting each other off and not yelling at each other, we'll be able to have a conducive debate, which is what we're hoping for tonight. So, Ahmed, this question is for you, and then we'll do the a minute 30 like we did before for everybody. So, Ahmed, do you have a specific action plan for combating colonialism on campus?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Yes. Do you have a specific action plan for combating colonialism on campus?
So an action plan requires getting feedback from people on how they want to approach it. I understand that if I get elected, I'll represent the student body, and by doing that, I have to reach out to understand the consensus around it. However, it is a very controversial topic. People have different perspectives, and looking back at history, you might get stuck there and stay there. To look at it from that perspective, we respect all indigenous communities. Well, I respect all the indigenous communities because they represent the people that, with their morals and with their beliefs, that created where we are right now. They have such impact indirectly. And raising awareness about it by having conferences, which is the action plan, about who are they. I came from Dubai and I had no idea about indigenous people and their role within the community and how history was shaped, because in the Middle East it's a different
10 seconds.
Different history. But making sure that I'm aware of what happened in the past and teaching the generations coming after is what's crucial. Thank you.
Masuma.
Can you repeat the question for me?
Yes. Do you have a specific action plan for combating colonialism on campus?
So I specifically study decolonial theory. I also identify as an Afghan settler here in Mi'kmaq territory. I was born and raised here in Mi'kmaq territory. I think something to recognize is the fact that this university constantly and always recognizes that we're on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory, but then there's no action. There's no real action behind that. And I think I'm not here for a lip service, as I said earlier, and I don't think that I'm going to be the one that's going to create this action plan. I want to engage with communities.
1 minute.
I want to engage with Indigenous students, racialized students, African Nova Scotian students who are also part of this community, to ensure that we create this action plan to challenge colonialism together and create a culture shift to recognize the fact that colonial history and colonialism and the oppression that comes with that kind of identity. As someone who is from a people who have been colonized, I understand, but I'm not here to speak for all folks who identify with that, and I'd need to talk to the community to create that plan. So I want to work with you to challenge colonialism, and I hope you'll have me to do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Evan, do you have a specific action plan for combating colonialism on campus?
Can you actually give me a definition of colonialism? Because it's sort of thrown around in a way that it could mean multiple things.
What is... I don't have a definition of colonialism on hand. Point of order.
There is a definition of colonialism on the DSU website in the Equity and Accessibility Office. Under definitions, you can find the definition of colonialism there that the Dalhousie Student Union has been using and producing.
What is it?
I'm asking the moderator
Just
to
give
do
me
that.
1
It's not an
second.
open part, so you can wait.
I'm sorry. Where did you say this was?
Go on the DSU website,
Yes,
then search Equity and Accessibility Office. Then on the side of that page, you're going to see definitions, and under definitions, you're going to find the definition of colonialism.
Thank you. Okay, colonialism, the process of domination of one territory or nation by another. This occurs through the acquisition of land and resources, as well as domination and or elimination of indigenous populations through political control, physical occupation, dislocation from land and culture, and genocide. Canada is an example of a settler colonial state where indigenous people have been targets of policies and practices aimed at their elimination for hundreds of years, and all non-indigenous people are settlers who benefit from indigenous lands and resources. Evan, do you have a specific action plan for combating colonialism on campus?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is that I don't believe that most people actually concede to the idea that we're on Mi'kmaq territory. I think most people in this room would actually identify themselves as Canadians. And that's not to say that there hasn't been an absolutely atrocious history in the past, because there has been, right? I am personally a First Nations person, right? I've been on reserves. I've seen what they're like, right? You know, like, but to sort of have this idea that colonialism still existing and perpetuating some sort of systemic racism amongst people simply isn't true, and there aren't any statistics to back it up.
Thank you.
No,
Audience, please. Andrew, you're next.
Well, a specific action plan is something that we're going to have to take real careful look at, because it's like walking on thin ice in early spring. If we're not careful, we're going to fall through, and we're going to distance the people we're trying to get along with. You can't judge the son for the sins of the father, and I think we all understand that, but we do need to accept that, you know, some shady things has been done. My father helped me recognize that because he worked out west teaching on reserves in Manitoba, and
1 minute.
we're going to have to look at things, what we want our end goals to be. We have to find our common end goals. I think we all have the same common end goals, and we're going to have to agree on certain ways to achieve those end goals moving forward. We just can't keep looking at the past and trying to make a future from it. We have to recognize the past and know what we did wrong to have a better future and understand people because of that. But we need to look at what we want for our children. And, you know, a lot of us aren't thinking about having children, but most of us are going to have children, and we want to know what kind of future we want for them. And I think working together collectively is the best way we can go forward from this.
Thank you. There will now be a 10-minute discussion. Candidates, you will be respectful to each other. I will be much more harsh when it comes to cutting you off if you guys are found disrespectful.
May I go first?
Yeah, you may begin.
Okay, I wanted to state that, you know, colonialism isn't just a past. I want to talk about how the fact that this nation state was actually created on a colonial framework and continues to perpetuate colonial violence. When you're building a nation state on, you know, colonialism, and you're building it based off of the fact that you're creating a society where you're separating and segregating and oppressing certain groups, you can't just talk about it as it's a past thing. It's not a past thing. It's a current thing. The state of the reserves, the issues in foster care, and how Indigenous children are overrepresented, the modern day residential schools, the 60s scoop, like you're not talking about things that are actually happening right now. The fact that Indigenous men are the most, like, are incredibly represented in the prison system, or the fact that, you know, the missing and murdered Indigenous women. Have you forgotten about that? That's something that's happening now. Tina Fontaine's happening now. Colton Bushy's happening now. It's not happening before. It's happening now. It's happening right now, and it continues to happen because this country was built off of that framework. So until you change the framework, you're going to continue to perpetuate such violence. And for folks to think that this is a past issue, Indigenous people are telling us that it's a now issue. It's happening now. When Indigenous people are telling us that they're dealing with colonial violence, who am I as a non-Indigenous person to say no? I'm not going to question their experience. I'm going to be here, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to show up and be there for them. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm not here, to just talk about lip service. And that's what I'm talking about. When we recognize unceded, unsurrendered land, we're talking about indigenous sovereignty. So this university can acknowledge indigenous sovereignty, but not put any action behind it. No, we need to talk about the colonial framework, not only of this country, but also how it plays out in the institution at Dalhousie, and how it marginalizes indigenous folks, racialized folks, and other POCs. It's really important because colonialism isn't just attached.
You talked uninterrupted for 2 minutes.
No
Let
problem.
someone else have the floor.
Colonialism was a popular concept back then, and the emotional damage that the indigenous people are facing right now is just a byproduct of what happened in the past. When I said people get stuck in the past, does not mean we forget what happened, but we address it. Just because we asked this question right now, it's a good way to constructively talk about and raise awareness about what happened. And consultation is the resolution and is the action plan going forward. We're not going to make decisions based on our beliefs of what they think, but it's also the beliefs of the indigenous people and how they feel. Inclusiveness is very crucial when it comes to trying to deal with the symptoms of colonialism that is occurring right now, and we need to address it. Action plan is going to be a difficult part of finding a resolution, but us discussing it right now in front of everyone here is one step forward. We have to take it one step at a time and not jump to conclusions and find a resolution as soon as possible.
Just to add on to that, my father did work out west on the reserves, and he told me it was all about education and end goals. He said they weren't always offered the best opportunities, and we've fixed a lot of that since he was out there in the 70s. And we have to keep moving forward. Progress is slow, but it's doing good. I think we're making way in the right direction. And I think if we start looking at each other more than just what we are, we're all human, we're all mortal, we all want to live a good life. We all have to find these common end goals, and we all have to come and compromise on it. We do owe a debt because of the shit that we did. European societies did dominate through oppression, and we have to accept that. But we need to move forward, and we can't forget it, definitely not, but we need to find out what we all want and how we can best promote each other's successful and flourishing life, be that academic and economically.
While everyone's talking about feelings, I'd like to bring up some statistics. Oh God, statistics, they're so awful. So essentially right now, Masuma, would you believe it that our federal government spends more per person?
If we can just have a discussion and not back and forth question and answer to each candidates, that's what we're doing here.
Why can I not address someone?
You can address, just it has to be in an open discussion that all candidates can participate in. There we go.
Okay. So okay. So right now, the Fraser Institute back in 2014 published a 388-page study that showed that people who are not indigenous get about $11,000 worth of federal programming a year. People who are of First Nations have $13,000 per year. So since the 1950s, so in the past 7 decades, the funding for people who are not First Nations has went up by 387%, and it's went up for Aboriginal people by 889%.
I think an important report to recognize is the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that has been put out. And I think that, you're talking about, or folks are talking about the, since the 1950s, but don't forget about the 60s scoop. Don't forget about the fact that this is literally still happening. It's not a past issue. It's happening right now. We're talking about the fact that Indigenous women are more likely to go missing and murdered. This is really important. The fact that we're sitting here with racialized and Indigenous people who are in this campus right now, who are hearing this rhetoric and who are feeling not okay when you're talking about this stuff. it's not okay to tell a community that your lived experiences are not real. And I'm here to listen to Indigenous people and not tell them how to feel. I'm here to support them. I'm here to work with them. I'm not here to oppress them. I'm here to be a solid ally through action and not just lip service. So if you're gonna mention reports and commissions and stats, I think you need to also look to the TRC and look at the recommendations towards this Canadian state, because then you'll really be forgetting a really important part of it when you mention, folks being proud Canadian citizens. When the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau talks about the TRC, how can you not recognize it?
Yeah, exactly. How does this pertain to Dalhousie?
Dalhousie is located on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory.
In Halifax,
and
Nova
we
Scotia,
are in
Canada.
Jabuktuk in Mi'kmaqi, and we are all treaty people.
You understand that Aboriginals as well, they fought over land during their time as well, before colonialism, right? They fought and they genocided each other over land, right?
Genocided each other? Genocided is not a word.
Audience?
I like how we are discussing on behalf of the Indigenous people without understanding how they are feeling and their perspective on it right now. And that is one of the fundamental problems why we cannot work together, because we always speak on their behalf and never listen. We talk too much and we try to do things that we think it's right, but at the end of the day, without consultation and working together with them to solve the issue, to understand how we can reach proper consensus, we're not going to solve this issue.
If we can't solve it by already giving them more money per person in federal programming, then what's the answer?
Money does not solve issues such as emotional and mental health. You can always fund cancer, but at the end of the day, cancer is still found and people are still dying from cancer. So money, if you're going to fund every time when there is a problem, what about allocation of money and understanding the effectiveness of the funding in the first place?
I think education is the key, honestly. We need to start understanding each other better. You can't... it's just a human thing. If you don't understand something, you're programmed to fear it or dislike it. And if we just can understand each other a little bit better, be that through workshops or community engagement projects or different symposiums or speaking talks or anything like that, then I think students will start understanding and realizing that we're not all that different.
There's 25 seconds left.
We are on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. We are all treaty people. We are on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. We are all treaty people. Dalhousie University is located on Mi'kmaq territory in Jabuktuk.
Halifax, Nova Scotia.
All right, that's the end of that question. So now we have another question, and this will be directed back to Andrew, since he was the last one for the last one. Andrew, just give me one sec with my timer. Andrew.
Yes.
With everything that happened this past summer, with the DSU withdrawing their participation in the Halifax Pride celebrations due to concerns with pinkwashing, how do you plan to address this issue if it arises in the future to ensure the LGBTQ+ community at Dalhousie is adequately supported?
Well, we're in a free country and we all have our rights, and we have to protect those. If you want to celebrate the fact that you're LGBT+, I think we should all support that, and the Pride Parade should be a place that's a safe, fun community event where you can express yourself however you want to express yourself. And if we ever stop someone, any student, from expressing themselves or hindering their rights to express themselves, that's just a crime against all students. We just have to allow people to do what they want to do as long as they're not infringing on the rights of others. At a certain point, supporting each other.
1 minute.
Is that 1 minute left or 1 minute burned?
1 minute left.
Oh, wow. I think that the Pride Parade's a real fun experience for all friends and family. Everybody can go and have a good time. We should never stop anyone from doing that for any reason whatsoever.
Thank you. Evan, sorry, it was you next.
Can I ask what pink washing is?
I believe that's probably on the DSU website as well. Let me make sure that that is the case.
Point of order, it's not on the DSU website. It would be on the NSRAP website.
I'm sorry, what's the website?
Nova Scotia Rainbow Action Program. You'll find the definition for pink washing there.
What is pinkwashing? In broad terms, pinkwashing is a term used to describe when governments or corporations portray LGBTQ plus friendliness as a way of distracting from violent and oppressive policies and actions.
So my first question to that would be, how would a corporation who decides that they actually do support the LGBTQ community, how is their support in itself pinkwashing? How is it, because just because a corporation says that they have a political ideal within the political spectrum, they say, I support this and I support this with my company, then why are you not happy about that? Shouldn't we all be happy that corporations today are okay with people within the LGBTQ community? Isn't it amazing how far we've come when it comes to social issues like this?
Okay, thank you. Misuma.
Yeah, I think talking about the motion that passed in a previous year, not this year in the DSU, but the year before last, so it impacted the summer that just passed. The motion did not state that it would stop any of the union members from going to the Pride Parade. It did not state that. So that's misinformation. I think it's important to recognize that the DSU said that it would not take part in the Pride Parade that was happening here in Halifax because of the issues that happened at that Pride meeting and the issues that the 2S LGBTQ plus community brought up, that they were not feeling supported by this and they felt that there was pinkwashing happening. And actually there's reports of pinkwashing that had been happening at the Pride Parade for the past couple of years. And how would a corporation take part in pinkwashing? It's very simple. If you pay attention to the definition, it's by saying that you support 2S LGBTQ individuals, but not actually doing it. You're just putting money behind it, but not actually hiring folks, not actually hiring two-spirited people, not actually hiring Black trans women. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about action, not just lip service, which I keep saying. So pinkwashing is when you say that and you are friendly, but you're not actually friendly. You have policies and actions in place that do not promote 2S LGBTQ solidarity.
Thank you. Ahmed.
Representing a community, we have to make sure that when it comes to policies and regulations, it's all about the perception, as Khan said, of oppression. You can always have planning. You can always have things that you want to accomplish, but when it comes to execution, they are not done. There is a lot of misconception that goes around, and people do not really try to understand what's happening in the first place before making a judgment. Supporting such a group that some really feel discriminated against is not good for our community, because that breeds more divide. And at the end of the day, I'm always going to repeat this, we represent the same badge. And if you feel like looking at it objectively, a group or a person, an individual is being discriminated against, then you need to solve this issue. Even just because that identity is different and unique does not make it a different of an issue than it is to a normal human being.
Thank you. Candidates, you have 10 minutes to talk about this. I will be making sure that you guys are respectful. Audience, please, no interruptions.
May I start?
Yep.
I think it's really important to recognize that the motion that passed was passed by the DSU Council, the council that represents the Dalhousie Student Union. It's not just made of executives, it's made of faculty representatives and also community groups. There was a generous discussion over weeks that because I was sitting there, not on the council, but watching and listening in the council meeting about the conversation that was happening, and councilors went back and forth and discussed it and talked about the community. Halifax Pride actually came to council and even presented, and when they were asked about what action they took about the pink washing, they could not answer. So the Dalhousie Student Union was faced with dealing with this, and faculty reps, community seats, executives all voted to not partake in the Pride Parade, the Halifax Pride Parade, and that's something to recognize. Is the DSU Council did it? It's not just one individual, and it was specific to this summer. It doesn't mean that it can't happen again. The motion hasn't been revisited, and I think it can be, but I think we need to talk to our community groups before doing so. I don't think we can just say, yeah, let's do this thing. We need to really talk about it. We need to bring the conversation back, see what's been done. Has anything been done? There has been, from what I've been hearing from some folks who are part of that community, who have said that they feel that it's better, but not so great, and folks that are saying, no, they still haven't talked to me yet. They still haven't addressed the pink washing. They still haven't addressed my community's concerns. So I'm here to listen to that community. I'm not here to speak for them, and that's it.
Audience. Proceed. It's the open discussion. You guys can proceed.
So I think we all understand here that within English law and within Canadian law, it is actually a discriminatory act to not hire someone based upon their sexuality. That's just the truth. If somebody were to do so, you could sue them, right? So it's like, okay, you're talking about this pink washing concept and whatnot, but do you have evidence? Do you have actual evidence of these corporations that decide to toss money at the Pride Parade who are just actively discriminating against people? Or is it just this another outlandish claim without any evidence?
The pink washing specifically that the 2S LGBTQ plus community brought up was the fact that there was a campaign that was going around that was showcasing a nation state as being very queer friendly, when in reality it wasn't actually talking about how that state is also oppressing Arab queer folks. So I think like that was the idea and that was the concern, is that folks were being silenced, and when the queer community showed up to that meeting, there was a bunch of cis straight folks that were in the room who took over the vote, and that was the issue. And that's why a lot of queer 2S LGBTQ plus people did not partake in Halifax Pride. And so I encourage you to talk to the community. I encourage you to reach out to the queer folks in your life to talk about these issues. And how do I know that corporations do that? I know that because my friends are part of this community, and my trans friends tell me how hard it is for them to not only get a job, to find a place to live, to get into university, to be accepted. Every day they go through transphobia, and it's not to be like, you can't just state that. That's reality. That's what they're talking about. And those are their lived experiences. And that's what I'm here to hear. And that's what I'm here to support. I'm not here to talk for them. I don't want to talk for the community. I just want to support the community. So if you'd like to engage with me in that, please vote for me.
I don't want to trivialize anyone, but this is one of those common things that I think we're all suffering, and actually, yes, you're right. The LGBT community is suffering more than most people, but we're all struggling with education, understanding each other, and getting jobs. It is extremely hard for everyone, and yes, it is harder for that community. But I think we could have done more good by showing up to the Pride Parade than protesting it. If we had shown up with information and flyers and given those out while we're at the parade, making ourselves still known, supporting the people who did want to go, to school as we're supposed to be doing, and advocating while we're there. We could have done more good than protesting it. That's my opinion, but also education. Like, the more we know about each other, the less we're scared or the less we fear about the things we don't know about. And that's just one of the things we need to do more on.
When the community is saying that they don't feel that the Halifax Pride Parade is a safe place for
5
them,
minutes.
when two LGBTQ plus folks are saying that they don't feel that that's a safe place. And again, I want to reiterate that the motion did not state that folks cannot go to the Pride Parade. It just stated that the Dalhousie Student Union would not be partaking. And that doesn't mean that folks who are part of the union cannot go. It did not say that. So I think it's really important that we don't provide false information.
If you don't feel safe, we do have an amazing police force in the city, and we need to contact them. And no, I'm being serious. Like, if you don't feel safe, that's not good. No one should ever not feel safe to be at this school or in this community. And if we can get more people, if we can get more of these, uniformed officers to help out, or more security, then if that can make you feel safer, that would.
I don't know if you've heard of a concept called police brutality, but that's not what's going to help the community, especially racialized and indigenous. You're not going to.
I do understand.
I'm not done speaking, Andrew. You're not going to be able to do that through doing that. So if people are saying they don't feel safe, having police there are not going to make them feel safer. What are you going to do if folks are saying they don't want their union to put money towards this, and it passes through the highest governing body of the union? How are you going to change that? That's what your community is saying. Are you not going to listen to them? I am.
I am listening to them, but these are people who we hire to protect our community. And yes, there is police brutality, and we need to address that as well. But who else are we going to go to protect each other? I mean, what do you want, militias running around?
Well, that's an issue that racialized people have to face constantly every day, not being able to.
And that's why we've been working.
I'm not done talking, sir. So, it's an issue that, a lot of racialized people face. So I don't think that you're going to trivialize it by putting more uniforms when people are saying they literally don't feel safe by that. You need to talk to the community and rethink how you think about policing systems and how it's literally incarcerating racialized folks at a higher rate than everyone else, and trans folks and marginalized identities. So it's really important to recognize that, Andrew.
Moving forward, we always have to reach out to those communities and understand their situation about this issue. If it arises in the future, things change, and we as a council and as DSU executives, maybe in the future, we have to be very proactive in our approach and not wait for the problem to occur and then find a solution, but to find the error before the problem occurs. And that's the approach that I will be using moving forward if that ever happens again.
Masuma, if you have actual proof about the
Candidates
fact that
don't
people,
address each other. Address the moderator.
if you have actual proof about the fact that people are being discriminated against within the workforce based upon their sexuality, they can take action through the federal government against that, because that is illegal. We have made that illegal.
If we keep depending on people and not solving the problem at hand with the power that we have, then why do we keep delegating this problem and waiting for someone to solve this issue? Why not solve it ourselves? Why not talk to people and find consensus and work as a unit to solve it? Why wait on someone to do it for us?
Yeah, I'm not going to wait on the government to address these issues because they haven't been addressing these issues. It's just recently they talked about all the homophobia and how they fired all the queer folks within the government, and then they still aren't actively hiring folks from that community. And if they are, they're not racialized folks from the queer community. They're not two-spirited folks. They're not Black trans women. So I think we're not really talking about the intersections of this issue. And I think if we want to focus on pride and on queer issues, we really have to focus on an intersectional anti-oppressive approach. You can't just have one size that fits all, because we're all different. As I said, we all have started from different points. We all have different lived experiences. It's really important that we recognize this. In an ideal world, sure, we all started from the same place, but that's not true. I can't tell you the experience of a Black trans woman, but I can tell you that I am friends with folks from that community, and I can only do what I can as someone who's trying to show solidarity and show support for folks who are dealing with oppression by taking action and not waiting for governments to take action, because missing and murdered Indigenous women still happen, and the pink washing is still happening, and queer issues are still not being prioritized. So I don't think it's the smartest response is to wait and give it to the government. Students are voting for us to take action, not for the government.
You haven't brought up any. You haven't brought up any refutation
Evan, please
of my argument.
just only address the moderator.
Nobody has brought up a refutation of my argument then.
All right, and that's 10 minutes.
Sorry.
Okay, we are going to move on to another question. The next thing I want to say is we are going to be limiting, during the discussion, a candidate can only speak uninterrupted for 1 minute before we want to make sure all voices are heard on this panel. We don't want anybody feeling like they're not being...
Point of order, can you cut us off then to ensure that we're all...
I will cut you off.
Thank you,
yes.
that would be great.
So we're gonna go. We're gonna loop back around. Ahmed, why do you feel adequate student representation on Board of Governors is important, and do you have an action plan for increasing student representation on the Board of Governors?
Representation of students on the Board of Governors is very, very important, because we always have to have representation that represents our ideas and concepts. So having someone that we can trust and that share the same values as the majority of the people on campus is going to help us become more effective when it comes to this decision making and tackling issues. So an action plan would be
1 minute.
Would be knowing all these communities that the house the community represents, and having representation to really emphasize on our diversity, not only by our race, but also how we think and our concepts.
Thank you. Musuma.
Yeah, so I actually ran for Board of Governors in my first DSU election. So currently, students don't sit on the governance committee in the Board of Governors, and that's a really huge issue because it basically structures the whole way that the Board of Governors works. So essentially, we only have 3 student voices on the Board of Governors, and they're constantly outweighed by administration and other members. So students are constantly being silenced. When students are talking about the fact that tuition fees are rising, the fact that engineering students are paying so much, the fact that differential fees are happening, they're not really being prioritized because their vote never actually does anything, because there's only 3 and then the rest of the board. So what I would do is pass a motion through council, act, create an issues policy, and work with students to lobby the university to create greater student representation and mandate them to do so. And I think we can do that together.
Thank you. Evan. Yeah. Question is, why do you feel adequate student representation on the Board of Governors is important, and do you have an action plan for increasing student representation on the Board of Governors?
Well, it seems like the assumption behind this question is once again based on identity, based upon intersectionality, and not on the competence of the individuals of which are actually governing, right? So once again, why is it about race? Why is it about gender? Why are we making these things that have to do with the competence of the individual itself and how well they do their job?
1 minute. Is that it? Okay. Andrew.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one
Yes.
more time?
Why do you feel adequate student representation on the Board of Governors is important, and
Well,
do you have an action plan for increasing student representation on the Board of Governors?
It is important, mainly because this is the people who are deciding, what is going on, and they're a little disconnected, obviously, from us, and I'd have to say we are from them. It's a two-way street. We're going to have to let them know what we want, but we're also going to have to listen to them because they've been doing this for 30, 40 years. These are professionals, and if they have advice on how we can achieve what we want to achieve, let's say lower tuition fees, then we're going to have to listen to them because we can't get nothing, or something from nothing. And this is why I want to get involved with the community more, and getting more funding from our community so we can have lower tuition fees, so we can have better education, more services for people. But we're going to have to, give and take. It's going to be compromise. We can't have everything we want, and we can't let them have everything they want. And the action plan be opening channels, public channels and backroom channels.
Thank you. All right, candidates, you got 10 minutes. I will be cutting you off after 1 minute of uninterrupted speaking, just to make sure everyone's voices get to be heard. You may begin.
Okay, when we're talking about students and student representation, something that's really important to recognize is like racialized students. What you're asking about why we're talking about identity is racialized students cannot separate their blackness from their experience, from their academics, from anything. It goes with them everywhere, just like my skin color does, just like my hijab does. It's something you can't separate. And something really important to recognize is that the Board of Governors influences the budget for the whole university. So if we get more student representation, that means that students can have a greater say in what the budget looks like, but we can't do that until we're on the governance committee. But we can't do that because we don't have enough votes to get us on the governance committee because we can't pass a motion through BOG. So I think that that's really important to recognize, is that there's a lot of structural and systemic issues that are happening in the Board of Governors, and no one's really focusing on that. And I would encourage candidates to really do some research on the Board of Governors and the importance of it.
I think the presupposition of which you're founding this argument upon is wrong, basically in the sense that you're saying that identity will inevitably weigh somebody down no matter what. That is untrue. If people pick up the responsibilities of which they have in their life, they will not be hindered by the arbitrations of their own identity. You know that, and everyone knows that.
Please address to the moderator.
I was using you as in...
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So honestly, I'm completely against this idea of identity politics. This idea that every question that's been asked so far has to pertain to identity. It has nothing to do with actual policy. It has to do with representation of people of a certain racial group within a policy. That's all they're talking about here. And you're noticing this because these people are radical left ideologues.
So when you talk about identity, it's always in a negative light. We always talk about how our differences really creates this differences in what we believe in and our ethnic background. But why don't we always think about the positive light that our differences bring? You have all these different identities. You always think, okay, you have minority groups. These minority groups have different ideas, but why not embrace these different ideas rather than shedding a bad light on them? Linking it back to the question, it's a problem with the infrastructure. You have, for example, take it one step lower, you have the DSU executives that represent the human body, right? You have these five executives make decisions on behalf of the Dalhousie student body. And if we don't have this representation that looks at the entire scope of who we represent, it's not going to help us progress. Thank you.
So the Board of Governors, it seems historically, are results driven, and it is fair to say that they may or may not care as much as we do about what, or they don't care as much as we do about our experience here. They're running a university. They think of us as numbers, as cattle going through a line. But if we can start negotiating and letting them achieve their results, and by giving us what we want at the same time, we're going to start having a better time, and we're going to have what we want. And I think that's what I can bring to the table, because I've worked in environmental sector and I worked in the mining sector, and I've had to negotiate with public governments and landowners and corporations. And that's one thing that I'm good at, is negotiating, finding common ground, and showing people they can still achieve what they want to achieve while I still get what I want. Well, we get what we want. And if we can do that with the Board of Governors, we may or may not need more seats. If we, it'd be good if we did have more seats, but negotiation is always the best thing. Tactfulness and political strategy to get what you want to get. And I think that if, you tell me what you want, I can go there with a plan and we can achieve these things together.
It's been 1 minute.
I think it's really important, and moderator, I wanted this to be noted that the candidate who's talking about identities actually brought up race first in this conversation. We have been negotiating with the Board of Governors for years, and it has not been working. I don't think we can talk about the fact that this is just something that we're doing now. It's been happening. You know, budgets are about priorities, and the university hasn't been prioritizing their budgets towards student-centrics. Like when we're talking about how the fact that they raised tuition in a one-time increase by over 20% in faculties such as engineering, that's absolutely ridiculous. Pharmacy and others, and agriculture. When we're talking about student representation, it's important to have student representation because we want to have student voices on the Board of Governors, not just one voice to negotiate. And when we're talking about engaging with students and engaging with student voices, and we're saying that we want to do this work, we have to engage with students and not just tell them what our ideas on negotiation styles are. I think it's really important that we have students on the Board of Governors and we have more student representation on the Board of Governors. We can't just do it ourselves. We can't just negotiate.
1 minute.
Negotiating has not been working.
Negotiating may not have been working for you in the past, but I can guarantee you, you haven't seen me negotiate. And I have professional experience working with corporations, working with public policy sectors, and I can find us some common ground. That's what I do. That's what I'm dedicated to. That's my passion, is having compromise, finding people what they want and letting them have it.
There's no common ground on student debt. There's no common ground on the fact
That's why
that
you can't negotiate.
I'm not done speaking. There's no common ground on the fact that students are being marginalized, on the fact that students can't afford groceries, on the fact that we have to run a food bank because students can't afford to eat. There's no common ground on that. Budgets are about priorities. If you want to prioritize students, there's no common ground. You just prioritize them or you don't.
The issue here, and this is the third time it came up, is that people are making decisions on behalf of other people. Increasing representation in the Council of Governors will help have an accurate representation of the student body, and decisions will be more sound and accurate.
Well, I think we all acknowledge that we can't have an aristocratic system for every piece of government that we have in the world, right? So we're going to have people that are representatives of student body, and I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree that we should have more people that actually have to do with the budgeting of the school itself. What I'm saying is that the people who actually do go ahead and do that should not, it shouldn't be about the representation of certain students. It should just be the representation of students of Dalhousie.
I think the question wasn't talking about certain representation, but when you're talking about representation, like I said, you can't separate the blackness from your skin. You can't separate the race that you hold. You can't separate your gender. You can't separate the way that you identify. You can't separate those things. So when you're talking about student representation, you're talking about how those students self-identify and how they represent themselves and how they're part of our student body and how they represent students at Dalhousie. So when you're talking about student representation, you're talking about those students, and it's really important to recognize the significance of recognizing that those students and their representation on the Board of Governors is needed, and we need it now.
How about we just recognize students as students and stop bringing the ideas of race and gender into everything? Everyone has an equal opportunity within Dalhousie.
We can objectively just talk about and argue that we need more representation of students on the Governor Council in order to make more sound decisions. Race and gender are not being discussed. Objectively, we need more students to accurately represent the student body.
More and better representation. I think that we can all agree that effectiveness and representation is essential as well. Like, when you're coming to the table for negotiating, you have to have these tactics ready. And I think that we need people who can do that.
I think when you're talking about effectiveness, something really important to talk about is that the students who sit on Board of Governors are decided by the student population. So students are going to choose how effective these students that they elected are, and they're the ones that are choosing. So I don't think that it's up to us on this panel to decide who's effective and who's not, but rather empower students to decide who they believe is going to be effective on the Board of Governors.
But we can help them. That's our job, is to help them. We can help them become more effective.
If you guys have nothing more, there is only 1 minute left. Do you guys want to continue this discussion? Okay, we'll move right on to the next question. So I believe it was I'm sorry, was it Andrew or was it Ahmed that went first last time?
I went first.
Okay, so Andrew. So this next question is, so again, I want to make sure my timer is good. What are your thoughts on increasing tuition rates and decreasing accessibility of post-secondary education, given all the time and resources? How do you go about combating this issue, and what would the end goal look like?
It's going to be efficiency. That's one of my main points, my first main point in campaigning. Tuition fees don't need to go up. They may or may not, depending on what the Board of Governors or whoever thinks is going on, because they need to cover costs. But if we get more public support and more funding from the public by showing them what we're capable of and giving back to them, then we can get more money to keep our tuition rates down, more grants from the community. But we're not just going to get those grants for nothing. We have to go to the governor, we have to go to our politicians, show them what we can do for them, and then ask for that money in return. You know, it has to give and take. We have to give them something. We have to give back to our community. And then when the community sees us as a valuable asset, more so than we are now, they'll give us more money and support. And that will keep tuition lower. And so we have more accessibility.
Thank you. I believe it's Evan next. So, Evan.
I mean, I concede on everything that you just said there, to be honest with you. I guess, what's the question again?
Sorry, I'll pause. The question is, what are your thoughts on increasing tuition rates and decreasing accessibility of post-secondary education? Given all the time and resources, how would you go about combating this issue, and what would the end goal look like?
Well, if the Canadian dollar continues to inflate the way it is, then tuition is inevitably also going to go up as well, right? Because the value of the dollar is going to set the precedent for how much we should pay for our tuition, right? So on top of that, you need to understand that education can't be free, right? You have to pay a certain cost for education. I know the socialists in the crowd don't agree with me, but it's absolutely
Let's refrain from calling people labels. And you still have 38 seconds of uninterrupted. Okay. Masuma.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that the increase in tuition fees is like very much so connected to a decrease in accessibility in terms of post-secondary education to students. The reality is that students cannot afford to eat because tuition fees are too high, and that they exist in general. You know, students are working multiple jobs, and when you're talking, they're working multiple jobs, you're talking about graduate students who are international students who are paying differential fees to work on their masters, to do their thesis, to do all this stuff, and have to work 3 jobs while paying all these fees and not being able to like have any support. I think it's really important to recognize that, you know, this institution is making a lot of money off of international students, and we can't really tackle tuition fees without recognizing the ways in which international students come into play. And, you know, students can't be treated as cash cows. Students definitely face higher barriers. If you don't have the money to come to university, you're not able to get that education. So it's a direct barrier, and it's a direct barrier to folks who are coming from marginalized communities. And I think that that's something that we really need to connect with and reiterate and concentrate on, is that folks who are coming from these communities, who are the first time that, you know, first family member to ever be in post-secondary, are not the ones that have the money, and they're relying on student loans, and that's not enough. Students are not cash cows. Budgets are about priorities.
Ahmed.
The purpose of post-secondary education is to educate people and to breed this this talent. You know, if you're going to be a contributing member of society, you have to have the tools in order to execute on your vision or what you want to improve within society. The reason why these constraints are happening is because of the increased tuition fees and the decrease in accessibility, and that's what's causing us as university students to not be able to solve these issues in the first place. The accessibility for us has been decreasing, and it's limiting us from solving all these social issues that we are facing right now. it doesn't have to be social, but if you want to, if you see students, I have a lot of friends that have 2, 3 part-time jobs in order to support themselves, and at the end of the day, they end up in a minimum wage job. Then how are you breathing this education and knowledge within? How are we supposed to progress? So tuition fees should be decreased and accessibility should increase if we really want to breed a successful generation.
Thank you. All right, candidates, you have 10 minutes on this issue. Again, each candidate only gets 1 minute of uninterrupted speaking. Candidates, please do not talk over each other. You may begin.
Well, I'd just like to start off by saying if we want the best professors to have the best education, we have to be competitive with the private sector, and that's not cheap. It's really expensive. And if we want to bring these tuition fees down, which I think we all do, we're going to have to get the money from somewhere. And if we can engage our community more as a research institution and get more grants for research, that's going to be able to bring our tuition fees down. The more we can give back to our community, the more we're seen as a resource. So if Irving, I know we don't, everybody agrees they like them, they want to go out and they want to do an environmental impact study, let's get them to do the, Dalhousie University to do it instead of farming it out into some private corporation. We have the resources, we have the people, let's start working back for our community to bring our tuition fees down.
It all goes down to allocation of money. You can have excess amount of funds and be able to subsidize all tuition fees, but at one point you're gonna have to also support it with accessibility to resources. They work hand in hand, and you cannot really isolate one another. And you can see a correlation that is happening right now, and where there is an increase in tuition fees and decrease in accessibility. But what is the main purpose? If you're going to look at the private sector just to generate and make profit, then it's taking away from the overall purpose of why we are in the university right now.
I think a really important point to recognize is that in a lobby document that the DSU produced, it was said that it would cost less than 1% of Canada's total GDP to create free tuition, accessible tuition. And I think that, when we're talking about we need to be competitive, you're not talking about the fact that grad students are leading these classes and grad students are not getting paid a livable wage. So who are we competing with? These are the reason why we are a U15 university is because the grad students are doing a lot of the work. They're the TAs, they're the ones that are dealing with so much. And did you know that our grad students increased by 100% this year, and majority of them are international students? So they're paying double what everyone else is paying. So I think something really important to also recognize is when we have free and accessible education, it benefits everyone. It increases women getting involved. It increases racialized folks getting involved. It increases marginalized people getting involved in education, in academics, in finding jobs.
Well, you're right. International students pay triple, I think, or double or triple the tuition. They pay a ridiculous amount, and that is unfair. But our current system, we're using that to subsidize local and Canadian residential tuition to keep their tuition low. That's just how the system works. Is it wrong? Yeah. Can we fix that? Yeah. But we got to get this money from somewhere. And professors have to be paid. Grad students, facilities, it all has to be there. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm saying is that we need to get that money from our community by showing them that we can be the best research university in Canada.
For the past 2 years, I actually worked a minimum wage job, and I was well under the poverty line for about 2.5 years. And here I am, a neuroscience student at Dalhousie. It's like, well, how does that work? It's like government loans. You can get a loan from the government, and not only that, but the government is willing to actually grant you money for your existence within our education system because it runs our education system.
Not international students. And I think it's really important to recognize that, in terms of how many international students we have at Dal who are paying these fees, 20% of our population of Dalhousie students are international students. That means 1 in every 5 students is an international student who's paying those differential fees, who's paying all those taxes, who's not covered by MSI, who has to deal with issues like having a bill of $270,000 from Nova Scotia Health Authority without any support. I think it's really important to also recognize that students want grants, not loans. They don't want to have to do that. Students want to be able to be empowered by their education. And there's also something really important to recognize is the fact that the loan system, specifically here in Nova Scotia, has many, many, many issues. I'm one of those students who has been using the loan system. I have never gotten my loan on time. I've given all the materials. I have been refused my loan. I have dealt with so many issues, and I've had to work so many jobs to pay my tuition to be a student here. And I'm talking about the realities of student experience, and yeah.
International students face difficulty with language barriers, cultural barriers, difference in religious barriers. These barriers are supported through accessibility of resources, and to support them,
5 minutes left.
We're gonna have to allocate money for them, but they're paying more tuition, and they're gonna have to face with all these conflicts and barriers that they're already facing. And then you ask them how they're doing in school, and they're overwhelmed with all these factors that are affecting them. You have to look at it as a whole scope, but not, single out just tuition fees or only accessibility. We have to look at the entire scope of the problem and solve it, because it is a complex problem.
I would say that it's an intersectional problem, that all these issues correlate, that when you're talking about the issues of international students, you're talking about racialized students most of the time. You're talking about students who are from different backgrounds in STEM, women in STEM, people who have left their home, people who are dealing with accessibility issues, people who are dealing with loans. We want grants, and we know that, the government can totally do that. I think there was this, I'm 100% sure there's a stat that says that if the government of Canada adequately taxed e-companies, we would have enough money to produce free tuition. And the reality is, free tuition exists in so many different countries, in Germany, in everywhere. Like, you can't just talk about the fact that it's not. You can't just talk about the fact that this can't happen here. It can happen here. It's happening in a lot of places, and in places where people think that it's not as developed. So I think that we really need to recognize that we are behind in producing free education to uplift our society.
Spend 1 minute.
Where are the best Ivy League schools in the world? America. Why is that? Anybody?
No, we're not having audience participation.
I'm not allowed to ask my fellow candidates?
Syria used to have free education, and you have a lot of medical students that actually went and completed and became doctors before the massacre that happened in the Middle East, especially in Syria and in Iraq. But you can see that it is very much possible for the government to fund tuition fees and to help students complete their degrees and support them in the future.
This is another one of those things where we need to get students involved in local politics, because free education is good, and if we want to get that, then we're going to have to get involved in local politics. You have to go to your politicians. You're going to actually have to get involved in your community, more community outreach, and we're not doing that. No one here is doing that. I'm sorry. I mean, we are, no offense, I'm sorry, but it's not in the numbers that we need to be doing, okay? It's not enough is what I'm trying to say, and I want us to do more. I want more people to be out there voicing their concerns, having reasonable debates and discussions, and providing lists and a compromise so we can all get what we want and we can all succeed.
I think it's really important to recognize that, the DSU has been partaking in issues like that. Last year, we led over 1,000 students into the streets to protest tuition fees on the day of action that happened on November 2nd. And I think another important part is to recognize that, 20% of our students, I'm talking about international students, do not feel safe in going to a protest because they're worried about their citizenship and other issues. So if we're just going to take it in a single axis approach, we're never really going to get to the issues at hand. And we really need to talk about supporting international students and tackling fees in an, again, intersectional approach, because it's not going to be possible if we just take it from a single axis framework.
There's still 1 minute left of discussion if anybody has anything.
The reason why America has the best Ivy League schools in the world is because it's able to actually compete with the private sector, right? The actual economy outside of the federal government. And by making tuition, by abolishing it entirely. What you're going to do is you're going to create a private sector that is going to have better and more and qualitatively better access to degrees. That's what you're going to end up having, right? Because once education exists for everybody, it's like, well, other people are going to want to pay even more for it, or just as much as they do right now, for an even better, higher quality, better professors within their education.
Education should be accessible to all.
It is.
There's 15 seconds left.
Education needs to be accessible. We need to support marginalized students. We need to support students who are dealing with working 3 different jobs. We run a food bank because
5
students
seconds.
can't afford to eat. Tuition should be free and accessible.
Okay, so that's the end of that. We're going to take a 5-minute recess, and then we will be back.
Thank you again for participating. I am a new moderator stepping in for another member of the Elections Committee, and so I will be the one that will be fielding questions. So to all candidates, I apologize that I forget who we left off with. So I'll start with sorry?
I think it was me.
Oh, it was you?
Yeah.
Okay. So Andrew will get the opportunity to speak first. So this question will be going to all candidates. So as you may be aware, anti-Black graffiti was found in the Dalhousie Student Union building. Anti-Black racism is prevalent in our society at large and on campus. How will you address anti-Black racism in your circles of how have you addressed anti-Black racism in your circles of influence in the past? And how will you address issues of anti-Blackness in your role as VPAE?
Well, this is actually a unique question for me. If y'all didn't know, I'm from Arkansas, and about 60 years ago, we were heavily segregated, black and white Jim Crow laws and all that, and that's not a very long time, and there still is a lot of racism down there, and I grew up with it, and noticing it and having Black friends, and it was just really odd to see how people can think that way just because a person's color of their skin. It's absolutely horrible that anyone would write anything like that, graffiti, or think that way. But I think we need a new approach. The punishment definitely for these types of people, these actions, but education, I said before, is key to understanding, and we need to help these people become better members of society by letting them know what they're doing wrong and why it is wrong. It is absolutely unacceptable, and people's feelings are obviously hurt, and you personally can't do anything about that except for show people why this is wrong and how to stop it.
Okay, I would like to ask Ahmed to respond for another 30 seconds.
So the problem is that, by mentioning that there's someone did the graffiti, which was anti-Black and discriminatory, the problem is that we give a voice to the person that does not have a voice, a voice that does not represent who we are. What about the people that have the impact, have the power to work together and solve this issue? I don't see empowerment, because it's all about understanding who to segment and who to target when empowering. The people sitting here right now are the people that we should target, because we understand that through empowering our beliefs and we stand against discrimination, that we are able to address it. And we can address it by, again, raising awareness. It's all about not being ignorant about the issue, not neglecting it, not being blindsided by the action that is very derogatory. It is a very derogatory act, and the way we stand and actually act upon it is by empowering the people that stand against racism.
Matsuma, you have 30 seconds.
Sure. 30 seconds? So, I want to hold space for Black students, and I think it's important to recognize that I'm not a Black student, and I've been checked from my friends for being complicit in these systems of oppression. And I think what I'd like to do is help to empower Black students by talking to them, giving them space, holding space, making sure they're represented in the DSU, because we don't have many Black students hired within the DSU, which is a huge issue. And I think it's really important to recognize things like RJS, the Racial Justice Symposium, which is mandated currently under the VPAE. So I think empowering students through that and actually holding space for community members and being there and showing up when they need you and being there to support them when they're feeling overwhelmed because their fellow students are, regarding them as such.
Thank you. I do apologize for the 30 seconds. I just let the first candidate speak for 30 seconds and wanted to ensure that everyone had the same. So Evan, you are the last to respond. Yep. So this is around the anti-Black graffiti that was discovered in the Dalhousie Student Union building. As anti-Black racism is prevalent in society at large and on campus, how have you previously addressed anti-Black racism, and how would you address it if in this position?
Well,
I think we all understand as people within the 21st century that judging anyone based upon any characteristic that is arbitrated upon their being physiologically is wrong. You cannot discriminate against people based upon their race. It's disgusting to do, right? So the idea that it's preventative is a much deeper question, because the question of like, how would you go ahead and prevent this from happening again? It's like, well, it seems like the only way you could actually do that is to set up more security, really. I mean, and then of course the objection there is, well, you know, certain people don't want security and they don't feel comfortable with security around. So it's something that actually needs to be negotiated between two different sides of a bipartisan ideal.
Thank you all for your responses. This is on to the next question, and this time going to start with Ahmed, please. So many of the candidates have spoken about accessibility issues on campus, and currently the accessibility on campus is lackluster and could be given a failing grade. How would you address accessibility issues on campus to make sure that all spaces are completely and utterly accessible to all students?
Consultation. There are different groups or people that within our community that have special needs. They have, you know, they require more attention than others. For example, people with disability. When you talk about all the accessibility when it comes to resources, we decide to represent or have a solution to these problems regarding accessibility without talking to them and reaching out to them about how it could benefit them. You know, every single group of people may have different opinions about it, but if we're gonna be here and talk on their behalf, this is the fourth time it is mentioned, which is a very fundamental problem that I will be addressing if I get this position, is to reach out and to put myself out there for the people that need this support. If you need accessibility, I need to know why you need it, what you need it for, and how can I help you. So moving forward, decisions must be made through consultation.
Okay. Evan, you will have an opportunity to respond. No, it's fine. Okay, so you'll have a minute to talk about how you would address accessibility issues on campus to ensure that the campus is accessible to all.
Are we talking about physical accessibility?
It can be accessibility and however you interpret it.
Okay. Well, I think that Mary McDonald was doing a fine job of actually representing the students with disabilities on campus, but of course, because she has opinions of which the DSU disagrees with, they decided to pass a motion that says that because she decided to speak to people like Richard Florazone and Jen Davis, that she should not be on the council because of that. And of course, this is all arbitrated by a statement of office that uses vague terms of penumbra to try and fixate this idea that if you don't recognize the collective idea of the DSU, then you shouldn't be on it. I think that's entirely untrue. That is entirely an infringement on personal rights.
Okay, Andrew, you have a minute to respond around accessibility issues on campus.
This is actually something that I'm kind of familiar with. My father is the director of the Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped in Arkansas, and I've grown up around people who are deaf, blind, and physically handicapped, and you really don't understand how society is built only for those who are physically capable. It is bad, all right? There are no ramps around here. Like, signage is pretty, you know, kind of use the word crap because it is. There's no braille. Like, come on. We need to step it up and get back to the 21st century, first of all. Second of all, I've seen how my dad has worked and lobbied government and schools so they can be more accessible, and I can definitely use the way he did those kind of things here on this campus, and they'll be beneficial for everybody, especially blind resources. That's just one of my things I'm passionate about. I think that more ramps. I mean, geez, I go to the university club all the time. I think everybody knows what that is. They finally put in a ramp there, okay? You know how long they didn't have a ramp there, or one that was broken? Come on. And then there's stairs when you come in, right? I know, well, there's a ramp on the outside yesterday. On the outside, yeah, the back door, and then yeah, sorry, but yeah, you still go in and there's stairs, and it's kind of like, wait, where do I go from here? So little things like that need to be addressed and fixed, and I think I can do a good job in doing that.
Okay, Ms. Suma.
Just to address the misinformation that was given, the motion did not pass and was not voted on as the person resigned. So I want to ensure that, we address the access of the institution as a whole. I want to ensure that there's a campaign. And when we're talking about accessibility, we're talking about intersectional accessibility. We're talking about folks with invisible disabilities. I'm a person who identifies as a student with invisible disability. I have physical accessibility issues, and this campus is not accessible. I agree. So I think it's important that we connect with students with disabilities, work with the accessibility office to connect them all together, create a society, get students with accessibility issues and who identify with disabilities to really tell us what they need. Because when you're talking about accessibility, it's not only of the physical campus, although that's incredibly important. Of course it's important, but we're talking about many different ways that students need and are dealing with accessibility issues and have barriers in place. I want to make sure that the DSU app has a campus-wide map for every campus that ensures that you know where the physical accessibility lies within your campus, and also ensure that there are Braille copies available in person, and that's in my platform point. I want to address these
Sorry,
issues
Ms.
with students.
Suma, I'm going to have to cut you off. On to the next question. To give a little bit more time for candidates to sort of get through these questions, because we are at the tail end of the debate, I will allow candidates to speak for about 2 minutes on every question, so feel free to take a bit of time.
Is there any way we can go back to addressing the anti-Blackness, because giving 30 seconds is not enough?
No, I actually agree with you on that point, and really only stuck with the 30 seconds because that is the permitted amount the first candidate spoke to. I will add that question at the end. Okay. So again, 2 minutes for every candidate to speak on the questions going forward. I'm going to start with Evan. And if you could please answer the question of what is the biggest issue facing professional, so medicine and law students, and how do you plan to address the issues facing those students in your capacity as VPAE?
So what's the biggest problem that they face?
Yes, or main issues for students who are in professional programs such as law or medicine, dentistry.
Well, I honestly don't know because I'm not a part of that program. So I would actually want to go out and talk to people before I'm actually trying to reconcile something that I actually don't know about. So first of all, I can't even speak on that. I think there is a deliberate. I think the university is deliberately trying to turn away from the sciences. I think it's deliberately trying to turn away from empirical evidence. I think it is trying its best to keep a narrative of which that makes people feel oppressed. I honestly think that they benefit off of that, and I think they benefit off of people getting degrees that are nearly useless within the impact of society and what they can actually do within mastering their craft in society. You can boo that if you want, that's fine, but there's a qualitative difference between getting an anthropology degree and going into neuroscience. There's a huge difference. One is more specific to the axioms of which society needs, and one isn't.
Okay. Going to the next candidate, Ms. Suma, would you please give a 2-minute response?
Can you ask me the question again, please?
Yes, of course. So what is the biggest issue facing professional students, so those in medicine, law, dentistry, etc., and how do you plan to address that in your capacity as VPAE?
I think there's many issues stemming from all these faculties, and I think a really huge issue is, issues as in facing barriers due to tuition fees. I think that a lot of students in these fields don't feel that they're being represented within academia. They don't feel that they have enough support in their faculties. There was issues of like the law building not being accessible last year. There was issues like, do I need to talk about dentistry to talk about the lack of survivor-centricism, and the issues of like the need for some of these faculties, are actually all faculties faculties to produce a culture shift. There's so many issues that so many different faculties deal with, and I don't think that I can just talk about one of these issues or some. I don't have enough time, but I think what's really important is engaging with these students and talking to these students about what it is they're facing. And I think a really huge thing that law students are facing is like students who are from BC are not going to be able to graduate because they have to write their bar exam the next day, and they can't actually graduate with their fellow colleagues here at Dal because that's how Dalhousie set up the actual graduation ceremony. So that's one issue. The medical students don't have enough money to pay for the kitchenette and the changes in their space that they made. That's one issue. Medical students are asking for a prayer space. That's another issue. You know, like I could go on, but I feel like they speak for themselves.
Ahmed, please respond to the question.
So the question is regarding dentistry, students in dentistry and in medical school, well, and law school. But this is a very narrow vision that we are addressing right now. Well, take a step back to look at the whole scope and how competitive it is to actually get into medical school and get into dentistry school and law school, and they're making it so competitive with limited seats that it's affecting the people's ability. Even if they're qualified, even if they score perfect on their MCATs, they're still not able to enter and have their opportunity to live their dream. It is a dream that's taken away from every student every year, and so many students, and we need to address that. You know, looking at it, okay, if they make it actually to medical school or law school, what are the issues they are facing right now? Universities are trying to standardize things, and due to differences in accessibility and the support from the university, you're competing on a level where, for example, University of British Columbia will be able to support more due to more funding compared to Dalhousie University, for example. So you're competing on a national level where there's no fair level of accessibility and support in order to maintain high level of grad students that are able to support themselves and actually graduate with a medical or law degree.
All right, Andrew, please answer the question.
So over the course of my travels across the US and Canada, I've made a number of friends who have gone to law school and medical school, and what the consensus is from them is two things: overworked and underpaid while they're in school. I know for a fact that the Nova Scotian provincial government wants to expand healthcare in the province, and that's going to require hiring doctors, and where better than hire them from Dalhousie. And that's going to give a lot of people a lot of opportunities to stay in the province, to stay in the country if you're an international student, because you're going to have jobs that are secure here. Same with law students. A lot of them are finding that when they're graduating, they're not getting the money they thought they're going to get, and they're going into debt. And, you know, that's never a good thing. So they're going to places that pay more, as far as the States or BC or Alberta, you know, doing stuff that they don't really want to do because they have to pay off this debt. So I think that more co-op opportunities, more internships, lobbying with the provincial government for expanding healthcare to get more jobs for these students who can stay in this province and can have successful careers in the future. So that's what I want to do to help them, because I feel like overworked and underpaid is the main goal or main problem.
Okay, thank you. And for the next question, so in your position, how would you intend to help all students with a variety of different political beliefs, including the conservative and radical student voices, to be heard and valued and to engage them in a positive and inclusive space? I'm going to let Ms. Suma start.
You know, that's an interesting question, and I think we need to really talk to students and make sure that if we are going to have dialogue between these groups, I think we need to make sure that the space that we're creating is a safe space so that no student feels that they're being harmed in any way based off of their opinions. And I understand that, you know, we hold different opinions and people are going to feel one way about equality, and other folks are going to focus on equity and the importance of intersectional and anti-oppressive frameworks. But I think that we do need to have this conversation as human beings and as students, because there's a lot of issues that are happening on our campus, and there's a lot of students that are being, plagued by these issues. And I think that having an open dialogue is great, but I think we also need to recognize that you can't just, we can't have one side just disagreeing with the notion of there actually being like a lived experience of racism. And I don't believe that that's going to be beneficial. I think that we need to get students in this space willing to talk to each other, willing to understand where folks are coming from, to just sort of create some sort of solidarity. I know we're sitting at opposite poles or what have you, but I think that we really need to talk about it and talk about it as human beings, because we're passionate about these things, and I understand and I respect that. But you can't just negate folks' lived experiences for personal politics.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, I would like you to respond to the question next.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the details of the question again?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So how would you ensure, while in this position, that a variety of different political beliefs would be supported and valued in an inclusive space?
I think it was Hegel who said the pendulum swings from two extremes and finds the happy medium, and that is something that's been, historically evident. It's just something that is, and we have to curtail things like hate speech and things like that. But radical beliefs come from people who've been under so much pressure that they think their only way out is through one way, and then they get blinded by that because they're so passionate. And passion is a good thing, but I think we all have the same end goals, and we're going to have to find how we want to achieve those so that we can all have a better future. So allowing dialogues to happen in controlled spaces, kind of like this, with moderators, people who can step in and say that you're towing the line, you're going too far, is good. As long as we can keep open dialogue and discussion and have a diversity of beliefs, we can all have a little bit better future.
Okay. Ahmed, would you like to respond to the question next?
Approach. It's how you approach the people with radical or different views that does not really align with the views that you have specifically. In university, I've always been taught that to have and to adopt a global mindset is to have a universal scope of all the issues that are going on and never neglect one side of the issue. But we are not actively trying to build a global mindset. We need to understand each other through what? What are the differences? It's differences in culture and how we view things, how we greet each other. These things are small details that have such impact on how we are right now. The way you're sitting, the way you're looking at me, the way you're speaking, right? With each other. We're so different, but that's what makes us really a unified force right now. This is how we can make an impact. This is how we can make an impact. So if you ask me, how are you going to develop a global mindset? Why not have an international week? Why not have an international month? Why not have 365 international understanding and empathizing with all the different values? Make value of what others believe in. Even though it's not aligned with what you believe in, but it is constructive. Only if you make it destructive is where it causes harm. It causes harm to us specifically. You look at someone with radical views, and then you go like, oh, this person has radical views. But did you ever sit down and talk to them? Why do you have these radical views? Can I clarify it? Yes. Can I tell you? It all goes down to approach. You're not going to go in with aggressive approach expecting a person with different views to actually be comfortable with you to share their ideas. Nurture an environment, and that's what's going to happen.
Your time is up. I'm sorry. I will take no heckling from the audience, please. This is a debate for the candidates to express their views.
I'm just going to get you to repeat the question.
And that's okay. So Evan, how would you, sorry, I'm going to pull this back up. So how would you intend to ensure that a variety of different political beliefs are supported, valued within the student union, in an inclusive space, a positive and inclusive space?
Well, I find great irony in the fact that that this question has actually turned from political beliefs into identity once again, even though it was a fair question. I am seriously in this for the idea that free speech is the fundamental right that perpetuates free societies. That is the truth. That has always been the truth. So, I'm not in it for to be honest with you, I'm a conservative, and I found it more hard to tell people that I'm a conservative than that I've been in queer relationships, because people will discriminate against me more on the fact that I'm conservative, right? And it's not like the DSU is willing to break it up into like parliament where you have an equal amount of conservatives and an equal amount of liberals. They don't want to do that at all. They want to break it down into identity, right? So I am not in this for personal gain. I've told many people already I am willing to donate $25,000 of my paycheck from the DSU and export it to a Kenyan charity that facilitates schools within Kenya for young children. This is not for my personal gain. I just understand that there is a major problem with censorship going on within these universities.
Okay, so we're going to go back to starting with Andrew for the next question. Would you be able to describe what equity means to you?
I think equity to me is recognizing that, I think I said this before tonight, recognizing that not everybody starts out with the right hand, or that they start out with different levels, but once we get into university, we should all have equal opportunities to succeed. But equal opportunities only come when we can afford people, the rights and the adequate tools they need for success. And recognizing what tools people need is a hard job, and it's going to be difficult, but that's how we can become a society or university where we can all have equal opportunities, is by giving people equal starting points. And I think that's what equity means to me.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ahmed, would you please go next?
Different people grow up with different disadvantages. Not everyone has a head start. I'm grateful to have a head start where my father and my mother and my siblings supported me throughout this whole journey, providing financial support, emotional support. So not everyone gets to live that life. I'm very grateful for what I went through and the support I got from my parents. But if you look at it, if you're gonna look at equity, it's understanding the circumstance of the person and what they went through, and taking that while creating an action plan to help them reach the level that they want to reach. If you're gonna look at it from an equality perspective, you're still going to have a disadvantage, which is not really effective. If you're gonna, for example, if you have a person that we saw it in a couple of classes where you have a person with, you have 3, 2, and 1, so 6 boxes in total, and you have 3 people, right? How are you going to allocate resources? How are you going to help that shorter person and allocate more resources so they can watch the game over the fence? For me, it's all about understanding the circumstance and allocating the right resources in order to progress while dealing with issues.
Thank you very much. Evan, would you please answer the question? Of course. So what does equity mean to you?
I don't think it matters what it means to me. I think it matters what the definition of equity is. So I think it's kind of a loaded question. Well, if we're going to talk about the most equitable way of which, the most equal way that you can treat people is giving them the same opportunities. And that is what our society is founded upon. Everyone recognizes that. And that's why we have such a diverse group of students. It's not because that people are advocating based upon race. It's the fact that everyone, regardless of their race, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their gender, have the opportunities that everyone else has. Now, of course, there's going to be people who get their tuition paid for by their parents. Of course, that's going to happen, right? But what's the alternative to that? It's like not let them pay for their tuition, pay for everyone's tuition. Like what, you know, like how far do you want to take the idea of equity? Do you want a socialist society? Do you want everyone to make the exact same amount of money? Do you want every time that socialism has been implemented within society, especially in the 20th century, it killed over 100 million people. So I don't know exactly why you are cheering for an ideology that's been even more murderous than Nazism.
Okay. Decorum from the audience, please. The final candidate will be responding.
You don't have the right opinions.
Hooting and cheering is fine. Cheering is. Sorry. Just to clarify what I mean by audience decorum, cheering and exclamations such as that is fine. The room was just getting loud and I'm trying to get through the last series of questions. I meant to quiet down the room. Okay. So for the, actually, sorry, Ms. Suman, you didn't respond. Okay. Can you please provide an explanation of what equity means to you?
So to me, equity, it means my experience, it means support, it means representation, it means action. And it means action, what I'm supposing is action through issues policy so that it ensures that the DSU is actually taking action to ensure that we're going about it at an equitable approach. And I wanted to clarify that equity is not equality. And I also wanted to state that, you know, give an example, if there was 3 people and I gave everyone a cheese sandwich and I know that person number 1 has already eaten, person number 2 is lactose intolerant, and person number 3 hasn't eaten in 2 days, I can't give them 1 cheese sandwich. That's not going to work, right? We have to make sure that we're giving students what they need, and what they need is equity. They don't need equality. They need equity because they need to make sure that they have what they need. And the only way you can know what students need is by actually engaging with them. And students have told us, and I think from this question have informed us, that they want equity. And that's what I'm willing to do and give to students. So please vote for me.
As a vegan, I find that the analogy to cheese sandwich is oppressive.
Sorry, I'm moving on to the next question. I will be reminded that questions will only be asked by myself, please, at least at this section of the debate. So I would like to start off with Ahmed, please. How do you intend to help all students, reread the top part. So reconciliation is about forging and maintaining respectful relationships. There are no shortcuts. A quote by Justice Murray Sinclair. Senator Sinclair is coming to campus next week for the DAL 200th anniversary. Would candidates be able to explain what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission means to them and how you plan to implement the calls to action on Dalhousie campus?
Can you repeat the question, please?
In essence, how do you plan to implement the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on Dalhousie campus?
The lack of information I have does not give me an opinion on this question, so I will skip my turn.
Okay, thank you. Evan, would you be able to respond?
You're going to have to repeat it again because it was long-winded.
Okay, I'll make it short. Can you explain what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission means to you and how you plan to implement the calls to action on Dalhousie campus?
What calls to action?
There was a report of a series of recommendations on building reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada.
How so?
There was about 94 recommendations ranging everything from community development, post-secondary education access.
It all depends on implementation. So once again, it's a loaded question. It's too generic for me to just be able to give you the answer to that if you cannot give me a specific way of which they plan on implementing it.
Okay. How would you plan to address Indigenous reconciliation on Dalhousie campus?
This is still for me?
Yes.
Okay. Once again, it's about how do people approach reconciliation? What do you mean by reconciliation? What is your plan of action of which you're proposing that will somehow reconcile all these problems that people keep speaking about? Once again, it depends on the implementation. It depends on the action. You can't just make a generalization and just start using jargon and saying, "Oh, I accept them. Oh, I talk to them. Oh, it's oh, I can't represent them, but here's the solution." Like, it's completely paradoxical.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, would you be able to respond next?
I can give it a shot. My information is limited on this, but what I have read, I didn't get the chance to read the report. It is long, and I am in 5 courses this semester, so it's been a little busy. But from my understanding, well, first of all, I'm excited to see Sinclair here. I really can't wait to talk to him. That's going to be kind of fun. But my understanding is this is a beginning of closure, which we need. It's the right step, and we're coming together at the table, like when you have problems and you're trying to resolve it, you need to come together and have someone, a moderator, tell you, we'll give this, we'll take that, and we'll agree on things. So this is a great first step for closure and for us to be moving forward and progressing as one society and try to end these stigmas and problems that we're having. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be more than Dalhousie. We're going to have to go to the provincial government. We're going to have to work with other schools. It's not just going to be us, but us taking a step forward to work on these things is a good first step, and I am excited to do that.
Masuma, same question.
So I don't think I can tell you how reconciliation can happen. I think the only way that we can really talk about reconciliation in terms of Dalhousie and Dalhousie students and faculty is if we actually talk to like Dalhousie Indigenous Students Collective and Dalhousie Indigenous faculty and the caucus that they have as well. I think we really need to talk to the community about what they see reconciliation as. And it's important to recognize that we are in Mi'kma'ki. We need to consult with the community that's here. This is our university is on unceded, unsurrendered land. So I think we need to really talk about, the university keeps saying and notifies everyone that we're on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. So I think we really need to connect with the community and see what it is they want. I don't think it's just a flag. I don't think it's just lip service. I think what it means is for us to actually sit down and listen and recognize our privilege as settlers and recognize that this land is stolen and recognize that we are complicit in the displacement of Indigenous people of this land and recognize the genocide that has happened, the intergenerational trauma that has happened, and recognize the support that Indigenous students need. I can't tell you what they are. I'm not Indigenous, but I want to work with the community to do that work, and I have been doing that work, and I want to continue that work with our Indigenous students. So that's all I can say.
All right, moving on just so we can get through the next series of questions. I would like to ask Evan to please go first. Sorry. So can you please provide an example of leadership experience you have that qualifies you to be a student leader representing more than 18,000 students? Well,
to be honest with you, I don't have experience with that. I'm actually a very antisocial, introverted person. I pretty much keep my circle between about 5 people. The only people I talk to every day are pretty much my girlfriend and my grandmother. So I actually don't have experience within it. But I understand politics very well. I do. And I think that's what matters. And the fact that all of these questions have, of course, just been, 80% of them have just pertained to identity. Always, right? They pertain to minority identity, and that's it. Nobody's mentioned the fact that the vice provost, decided to make this make an opportunity for for the job without including white people to be allowed to participate within that job application. It's like, why is nobody talking about that? Oh, it's because it doesn't matter. That's why. That's why. And same with Mary McDonald. What happened with Mary McDonald? Right? It's because she doesn't hold the right political opinions that there was a motion to try and take her out of council. That's exactly what's going on. People want to censor political ideas that they don't like, and you will end up with an authoritarian government and civilization by doing so.
Ahmed, would you please answer the question?
I have held executive positions in leadership societies at university and in high school as well. And I've always been a people's person. I always like to be out there and talking to people, listening to what they have, because I get such energy from people that have ideas and are willing to share them. I was also a treasurer during a trip to Cambodia where we 25 students were able to build a school and a shelter for homeless kids in a village. So these qualifications gives you a glimpse of my intentions and what I want to create. Since I was very fortunate in the position I have and all the resources I have, I want to lead with high levels of integrity and make sure that I adhere to regulations and policies, and I'm able to do that.
Thank you. Okay, Masuma?
Yeah, so I have experience from high school. I was the captain of my robotics team. I was the president of student council. I also, when I came to Dal, I was I got involved in the Dalhousie Muslim Student Association from the beginning, and I was then the president for 2+ years, and I'm the outgoing president of the Dal Muslim Student Association. I think, I also worked in the DSU's Equity and Accessibility Office last year, and this year I've also been involved in student leadership, and I think my leadership has shined through. And I think something I want to recognize is my leadership is recognized across Turtle Island. I've been afforded the opportunity to go to universities such as the University of the Fraser Valley, to Ryerson. I'm going to another university. I'm going to Mount Allison on Monday because I'm invited there to speak for International Women's Week. So leadership is not the question with me. I have the leadership, I have the experience, and I've been able to actually use this acknowledgement and be able to lobby and connect with students in different provinces about student issues without spending a dime of DSU's money. So I think that that's something that's really important, is that I've been able to take advantage of the leadership and the recognition that I have in the community and across Turtle Island to really talk about student issues even when I'm not working. So I think that's really important.
Andrew, would you please respond?
Yes. So starting off a long time ago in a place far, far away. In high school, I was head of professional societies and social societies, and then I was in charge of Arkansas and Oklahoma, which is around 50 to 60,000 people from ages 14 to 21 for Venturing USA, which is a co-ed Boy Scout, Girl Scout, where we bring them together and we do more high-risk adventures. From then, I moved to university, and I was in charge of professional societies doing advocacy for public policy and community outreach. After that, I moved out west, and I was in charge of 2 more societies, engineering professional societies, where I used to advocate across the country at conferences, getting more corporations to show up for career fairs and offer more job opportunities to students. Then, on my internships and when I used to work for an environmental firm, I used to have to work with local governments advocating for different regional people and different groups, including people who have been traditionally oppressed, and reaching out and basically in charge of these areas and representing a whole lot of people with a whole lot of backgrounds. And my main thing was that every day I was on the phone, I was going to people because they didn't have the time to come to me, and I was finding out in person, almost to the point of being too in their face to find out what they want so I can accurately represent them, and so they can't complain. You can't complain if I ask you what you want and you don't tell me, or you do, and I actually do what you want. So that's what I've been doing. I've been in leadership roles my entire life. I'm extremely outgoing. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of you here, and I would love to get to know more of y'all, but yeah, I've been doing this for a long time, man. I'm pretty good at that stuff, so.
Thank you very much. Okay, so for our next question, I would like Ms. Suma to start. So addressing the fact that research has been done at Dalhousie from the law school and the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, as well as the Backhouse report supporting colonialism, sexism, and rape culture, how does this figure into how you would operate as VPAE?
So I think that colonialism, can you repeat that, sorry? Colonialism?
Colonial sexism and
Colonial sexism.
colonial sexism and racism.
So colonial sexism and racism are definitely interlinked. I don't think you can have one without the other. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about an intersectional approach and recognizing that things aren't just a single axis. I think we need to talk about the issues of colonialism and how it enforces sexism and norms and binaries and smash those binaries and smash the patriarchy. We need to talk about racism. We need to talk about the fact that this is happening on our campus and that our campus is built in a colonial structure, and it's reinforcing and perpetuating these narratives. We need a culture shift. The Backhouse reported that, but the university hasn't really done much on it. They can talk about Dal dentistry and say, yeah, we did it, but reality is I've worked with survivors this year. I've worked to create a better policy for Dalhousie students with a project such as Our Turn to ensure that our policy is good and our policy is accessible to students and survivor-centric. So I've been doing this work this year, and I'm sure that you can see it. Just look for it. It's right there, I swear. Yeah.
Okay, so Ahmed, would you please answer the question?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So given all the research that has been done around issues such as colonialism and sexism, how would you address these issues as Vice President External?
I feel like we touched upon...
Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, Michael? Oh, yes, no, I'm sorry. Okay, just for an example, Michael was the one who submitted the question, and I missed an important word of it. So the emphasis is that the research has been done at Dalhousie around issues of sexism and colonialism.
At a university or at any university, you do not have a topic that you don't look into, because if you have an issue, if there's a problem such as like sexism, racism, or colonialism, you're gonna have to have research. And I believe it is positive that Dalhousie University has been researching into these issues, because it is prevalent and it's still in our communities. You can still see through actions, sometimes through thought and through speaking, that people still are looking into these issues. But I believe that what's important is not only to look into these issues such as sexism or racism, but look into solutions. We always focus on what is the issue. Let's understand its history. Let's understand where it came from and how is it prevalent to our society right now. But I believe that there should be more research about how to solve these issues. How can we actively try to stop these issues and to build a generation that can really create change. Masuma said that it is a culture shift that we need. I believe it's a global culture shift that we must follow if we're going to go in the right direction.
Thank you. Andrew, could you please answer the question?
What were the specifics of it again? I know your computer crashed.
So there has been a large amount of research carried out by the Dalhousie Law School, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and the Backhouse Report pertaining to issues of sexism and colonialism, and how does this inform how you would approach being a VPAE?
So inform me how I approach the VPAE, all that research. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, yeah, awesome. All right, so we're a research institute. I think we can all agree that. I mean, that's what we are. So research is good. That's how we start everything. But I have to agree that we do need solutions. So I know it sounds like everybody says it. We do need more research. More research is good. And then we take more and more research and we find solutions and we propose solutions and we research those solutions because we don't want to do this wrong. We don't want to, it's hard to get it right the first time, but we can try, and the closer we can get to getting it right, the better we are. So, more funding for research, more research in general. I love it. Dal's doing a good thing, and it will, help me as VPAE to make decisions, because you can't make a decision accurately or a good decision unless you're informed. So you can be rational all you want, but you're going to have to be reasonable at the end of the day and take all your research and find the best solutions. So I would love more research, and it will definitely inform almost all of the decisions, actually, I will be using. Or I'll be making, so, yeah.
Did everyone answer the question? Oh, sorry. Okay, that's what I thought. Evan, could you please answer the question? Okay. So, oh no, we're okay. I have it. The exact wording. So there has been a large amount of research done at Dalhousie from the Law School, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and the Backhouse Report supporting colonialism, sexism, and rape culture, and how does this figure into your approach?
My question would be, how do they promote those things? How do they promote them? How do they promote colonialism through doing a study? How? Do you know in the past 4 decades, we've brought abject poverty because of capitalism down to 9%? Do you have any idea about how lucky we are to have free societies like we do that can actually help out other societies that aren't as free as us? Why aren't we addressing real issues? Like, why isn't the DSU being audited every year? How come people are able to how come people are able to rack up bills for their friends and for the council just to go off of away from Halifax and for a meeting, and then nobody's keeping track of that. Nobody's keeping, the entire idea behind this is that it's just a bunch of jargon. All that's being spoken here is a bunch of jargon. It's like, how about we all look at the evidence? Why don't you pull up the statistics instead of asking me about it? How about you actually pull them up?
Okay.
I'm damned, aren't I?
So just to get on to one of our last questions, I would like to ask that Andrew please respond first.
Okay.
So what will you do to address campus sexualized violence at Dalhousie next year?
Well, that ties into sort of the question before, the research. I'm going to have to read over all this research in very great detail to make an informed decision, which is going to help everybody. I like the fact that we started the what's the exact phrasing of the sexual assault victims hotline here at Dell. That's great. It's a great first start. We're going to have to keep doing more, and the research is imperative to the decision-making process, and I haven't had the time quite of late to be reading all that research yet because of my heavy coursework. But to start, education and understanding, working together, finding our commonalities instead of our differences, so people realize that you can't do certain things. Drawing the line, telling people where the line is, and then not just having harsh and strict punishment, but education for these people, so they understand why they did what they did was wrong, so they don't repeat what they did. So certain things like that are going to be what I'm going to be doing, I hope. So thank you.
Okay. Evan, would you please respond to the question around addressing sexualized violence on campus?
It's a vague question. What do you?
Okay, sorry. What will you do to address sexualized violence on campus next year if in this position?
See, this is the problem with this is that, you know, of course, sexual violence happens, right? It happens. We all know it does, right? Whether you've been a victim of it or not, you know that it happens. It's like, how do you prevent it? It's like, well, it's not just a question of implementing some sort of thing. It's a moral question. Why do people think that it's okay to do that in the first place, right? And how do you stop people who think that that's okay from doing that in the first place? That's the real question. But instead, they want to turn this into a question about, oh, how do you want to implement this, you know, useless, you know, way of reconciling this problem? You know, it has nothing to do with it. The fact that once they were asked about this hotline and how many people actually use this hotline, the DSU was unwilling to respond to how many people actually used it. It's like, okay, maybe it's not being used enough at all. Maybe we should stop using it. Maybe we should stop wasting our money on things that don't matter. Why do we spend $200,000 on O Week every year when we could actually just put that straight to textbooks for first-year students? We could have a library specifically for Dalhousie students for their textbooks. Why are we wasting money? Why?
But Suma, would you please respond to the question?
Yeah. So how would I? Can you repeat it?
How would you address sexualized violence on campus next year?
So I think through the passing of the levy and the creation of the Survivor Support Center and the implementation of the phone line, something I want to talk about is not giving out information on how many folks or how many people have used the phone line is to protect survivors.
No, it's not.
I
No, it's
also
not.
think that it's really important. Can you stop cutting me off? Policies. I did not. Policies. Caitlin.
Please continue, Ms. Suma.
You know, we need to reform our policies, and that's something that I did this year using a national action resource called Our Turn to ensure that our policy was survivor-centric. We were graded a D-, and with Dalhousie dentistry and all these issues, the current policy that's coming back through Senate should be better. It's not the best, but it's better than what it was, and I want to continue doing programming around survivor-centricism. I want to continue, like, talking to the university about the issues at hand. I want to, you know, I've lobbied the government about the fact that the MOUs that they got all the universities to sign up with surrounding these policies didn't have any teeth in them. They were very vague. They didn't give the timeline. So these universities don't have to implement these policies, but they have an MOU regarding them. So there's many issues at hand, but the most important thing is talking to survivors and listening to what survivors want, not what other folks want. Listening to survivors and believing them. The phone line is important. The programming is important. The culture shift is important. And we can only do that through doing it through dialogue and challenging this narrative of binaries and challenging this, you know, victimization or like, you know, shunning survivors and saying that their reactions or realities aren't real. I believe survivors, and if students believe in that too, they should vote for me. I believe survivors, and if you do too, I think you should vote for me.
That's complete virtue signaling. That's just complete virtue signaling.
Okay. This brings us to 8 o'clock.
Point of order. I did not answer the question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, you're right. Sorry.
So I would like to praise Masuma for her efforts and her initiative in Survivor Support Center. She brought it back after a while, and it is a preventative system in order to make sure that there is support for if you know, sexual harassment actually happens. You always need like a net safe in order to protect if it might happen. So moving forward, I will be working if I get elected on the program and making sure that it is sustained and people you know, they can use it and it is accessible in order to protect our students and make sure we protect all the student body.
Okay, thank you. And now this brings us to the close of our debate, as is now 8:05. I would like to thank everyone for coming out today, and also thank everyone who has been watching on our live stream. Please follow on the DSU elections Facebook page, as well as the website for continuous information on events for elections.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.